So, now fast forward. Fast forwarding in life, after I got a chance to really get out of the household that I was in, because it was so spiritual, and there was also a time in which I was removed out of the household from my mother, and we were put into foster care. And the first lady's house that we went to, and her name is Bernice Bell, she kept us in church at least 3 times a week. So this is what I'm actually now discovering is the occultation. People need to understand exactly how far this dimension and some of the things that control this dimension have really gone in understanding exactly what's going on here. The Essenes had already taken out extensive star charts to what was going on here on Earth, because when a star appears, then a person appears, that not too long after that, a person that corresponds to that star appears here on Earth. And they call that astrology. Although it's nothing like what you're seeing in the newspaper. So this level of astrology, for those who can read the stars, allowed them to know when someone powerful was going to be born, because what stars you were born around, or what celestial bodies you were born around, determined your level of influence by them. And so if you were born in if you were conceived in certain places, then your power would be guaranteed to be more than the average person. Now, let's talk about one thing here about, are we all the same? Surely an ant is not the same as a human being. They have different components. You can find the fractal of the human being in the ant, but as an existing being, the human is different than the ant. It's also this way from one person to another. Just like our fingerprint, we have a biorhythm that allows us to be different than one another. And this is beautiful still, because when we add our frequency to everything else, it makes a song. And they call that harmony. So what we're literally dealing with here is we're dealing with a time where we now have to actually pull apart everything that we've seen up until this point in our segment of living to determine where we're going to go next. That's the only way things grow. And so it just so happens that there are some individuals that are here on the plane now that are bringing higher levels of knowledge. And these beings serve as something like an inner stealth contact. What makes them have such titles is that they're carrying high levels of knowledge. Knowledge itself is magic. Let me explain it to you. I'm writing this on the board. Knowledge and magic. A long time ago, there was a system called voodoo. And the gods associated with voodoo were the orishas, or what we just call the ori. Their knowledge and wisdom and practices allowed them to control elements. Especially the 4 elements. What we're literally dealing with now is that, let's say a shaman, if you are with a certain type of shaman, a very powerful shaman, that shaman can bring a storm. He can bring a certain level of storm. And let's say that would be a class 2 storm. Would be the most powerful shaman. Now what's happened is, because of knowledge, those who are in control now can create a class 5 storm at the push of a button. So what you're literally dealing with in situations like Haiti, in situations like New Orleans, is that there has been a faction of individuals that have been practicing heavy magic against the systems like the one the United States is running on, Astarte, Venus, and other places. There's many things that they also don't know about the actual truces that have taken place between certain factions. And so what's literally happening is that there's a holy war. And they've always been telling you that there's a holy war going on, but the fact is that we see that as Muslim versus Christian. We don't see that, basically Muslim versus Christian, but we don't see that as spirits that are at war. And because we're all synergistically connected, when these spirits are at war, they're also at war within us. So if there's ever going to be a balance to that war, it's going to take place inside of the individuals first, and then it's going to reflect into their society. It's going to project into their society. So what's going on is that there's been so much conflict, so much fighting in this binary world, that many people have lost the idea of what they were even fighting for. Some were fighting for knowledge. If everyone would keep in mind that people couldn't even read in the days that the Bible first came out. They kept it at home like a talisman, just to ward off people's spirits. They couldn't read it. So this means they didn't even understand what was really written in there. So knowledge itself was, and being able to read was something that was of higher caliber, higher class. And so there was a large war that took place that was just to give us the ability again to learn. It appears that we won that war because now we have the internet. If you spend your time, you can actually cover so much knowledge, especially with just scribe.com alone, you can figure out what was going on here. Many people were also fighting because there was an enemy. They perceived that there is actually an enemy. And there's a saying that says, I've seen the enemy, and he is me. The enemy, what we found out because of this one particular shape, which is a pyramid, which is exactly how things emanate from the source and spread out from there. We started to find out that there was an enemy. It was only Ma and Pa. Because if you went back to your mother's mother, your mother's mother, your mother's mother, you kept going back further and further, you would eventually get less people. You would get a small village. And then if you kept going back, you would get an archetype, a giant, as they always depict them as. All of what we become collected into one being. And so we found out also that this, for a long time, existence spans out further than we even understand time. Meaning that it goes out into aeons, billions and trillions of years of existence, that there's a good possibility that consciously we weren't there. Subconsciously, of course we were there. So now what's happening is that we find that every single thing that's inside of us is every single thing that actually exists, if we understand how to tap into it. And that's what the secret became. There became multiple secrets to keep the information of how not to open up all of the information of what we call arcs. All of these arcs of information before it's time for an individual. Because each arc or each planet contains a certain level of knowledge. And then once one maxes out that level of knowledge, then they generally get too big. This happens on an auric level. And they must be removed from that reality into a larger reality. It's the same thing that happens when you're in your mother's womb. After 9 months of gestation, you must come out of your mother's womb or you'll bust her womb. You're getting too big. So that's exactly the fractal that exists for anyone who is ready to ascend Earth entirely, is to get spiritually large enough to where you can do that, where it's deemed that you've earned the right to do that. So spiritual growth is about tapping into your chakra centers, your heart chakra, your crown chakra, your root chakra, tapping into these chakra centers to enhance them so that you can actually be almost all-seeing and knowing on this dimension. And that's why I said almost. Because there are certain beings that know every single thing about planet Earth and only a few things about Mercury. So the thing is that on this planet Earth, there is a level that you can tap into all the knowledge here. And that knowledge is, of course, held in things like crystals. That knowledge is held on a wavelength frequency itself, and it can be tapped into. So what enlightenment is really about, or ascension is about tapping into this knowledge so one can get to a higher level.